Okay, well, good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here after almost 3 years of absence from Japan. So I'm so glad to be here with so many colleagues and friends. So I'm going to share with you some considerations about issues related to companionship with robots. And first of all, this is the institute that I founded and directed for years. We have now more than 250 people, including 100 PhD students. And as you see, the goal of the institute is to do very good science, very good technology, if possible, and then to bring as many devices as possible to the real use. And you see here a list of many pictures, actually, of real applications, deployment of our robots. So we have always been interested in working with real people in industry, in hospitals, at home, in the ocean, in the land, in many different locations, with children, with elderly, and so on. So we have gained quite a lot of experience on how to deal with this kind of problems. But I'm also fascinated by, I would say, inspiring movies, science fiction books, or just very exciting implementation by colleagues. And one of those inspiring books and movies is for sure iRobot. You know, I think that I read iRobot when I was young, but I've seen, watched the movie also a few times. And I must say that iRobot is still a source of inspiration for many different reasons, and is like a paradigm of robot companion, what we would like to have with a robot companion. But there is another, I think, a very inspiring movie. I'm a bit surprised that I never heard mentioned by the brilliant researchers in the project. But actually, Avatar is also, by the way, Avatar is probably the movie that got more money in the history of movies, if you remember. It was 2009. So what does it mean? That it was very, very popular among people of any age, in fact. And actually, there are two noticeable things. One is that in the original 2009 Avatar movie, the story was about a paraplegic soldier who lands on the planet Pandora, you know, to mine. And the adventure starts there. So he is a paraplegic person staying in the say spaceship, and controlling remotely the avatar. So it's exactly what this project is trying to do. But also more important, if you will, is that James Cameron is preparing a series of Avatar movies. They will be released in this December, and then next year, and then the following years. And they will talk very much about families, about emotions, about values of, I would say, communication and companionship between the avatar and the population of the planet. I don't know exactly, because of course we don't know yet, but in my opinion, there will be a very important source of inspiration too. Well, the movie iRobot includes a lot of very, very important issues that not many people actually have noticed. But first of all, there is the issue of regulation, okay? The 3 laws of robotics, but this is very clear. The second point that is addressed is about monopoly. There is only one big manufacturer of robots. It's a US Robotics Inc. You know? And this is clearly a problem, it's an issue. Then there is an issue, it's about the jobs. There is a scene about what is called robots building robots, you know, that is robots manufacturing robots, and so reducing jobs to people. And then the issue of reading, that again, reading human emotion. So the robot that can feel the emotions of humans. And then finally, the very final scene that is about robots creating their own community. And those are some among the big messages that are included in the book and in the movie. One important point that also struck me is when I was young, the science fiction movie, the most popular was 2001, A Space Odyssey. And then the real problem, if you will, was a supercomputer, HAL 9000, that became an example of super intelligence, artificial intelligence, but it was local, was concentrated. And then, you know, in iRobot, the intelligence is no longer concentrated, it's distributed. In fact, the robots are connected and controlled by the big computer and the monopolist. So it is web-based collective intelligence, if you will. But then there are other kind of intelligence, like the decentralized intelligence, and Professor Cecilia Lasky is a leader in that. She will talk about, for example, intelligence in a complex system, like the octopus or other organisms. So there are many different kinds of intelligence. So what we would like to achieve, in the iRobot movie, in 2035, actually in the Moonshot is even 2050, but there are intermediate achievements. So we could take it as a model. And one model is about the robot companion here. And then, of course, there is the nightmare that you may remember in the movie, that is the robot that gets out of control. And people have this kind of fear. We know that some of those fears are not realistic, but still people may have, and we have to consider this. So, like all of us, we are trying to look at the future and look at the past. So, for example, this is a representation that we have used while preparing the European project, the Robot Companion, analyzing the first wave, so the industrial robotics, the second wave, the service robotics, and the coming third wave with a number of very deep innovations that may lead to the concept of robot companion or to the implementation of robot companion. So there is a trend, a forecast, if you will. But since we are also engineers and researchers, we would like to look at the key technologies that are inside such robots that are needed to obtain this kind of robot companions in the future. And one important point I already shared with many PIs, is the role of science. So science can lead to disruptive innovation, and this is very important. If you consider, not sure if this can work. This one? Anyway. If you look here, you see this, for example, is a representation of incremental innovation. And this is a representation of innovation including disruptive innovations, unpredictable innovation, the ones that are not easy to, it's not like the Moore's law. It's something that is unpredictable. Well, science is able to generate this kind of unexpected innovation, and they can really bring to disruptive innovation also in robotics. Yesterday I was discussing with a colleague who is a mathematician about the role, for example, mathematics. This is a beautiful slide in which you see on the bottom the development of different theories and algorithms, and on top the development of technologies and applications. And you see how much mathematics, so theoretical science, was the source of innovation, maybe after 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, but of disruptive innovation. I think this is something that we should always consider to understand how what is called basic research can be linked very smoothly to applied research. Or also another way of being disruptive is to look at other fields. Professor Fumita Rai is presenting something that I've been also working on. That is, for example, the role of endoscopic capsules. Endoscopic capsules were generated thanks to the innovation of MEMS. So the MEMS are the core. So microelectromechanical systems are the core of the endoscopic capsule. So technology coming from a different domain and being included in the one and generating innovations. You see, by the way, in this slide that I like very much, how a discovery, that means a Nobel Prize that was awarded to physicists for the discovery of the effect leading to the transistor, ultimately brought to the development of technology like the transistor, the MOS, so the microprocessor, and ultimately the robot. So the robots ultimately derive from a scientific discovery that is the transistor. There would not be robots without the transistor. And this is also familiar here in Japan, where 3 Japanese scientists got in 2014 the Nobel Prize in Physics for the discovery of the fact leading to the blue LED that has revolutionizing the world of light sources. So the role of science is extremely important, like the role of convergence and connection between different fields. So what I like in the Moonshot program, in the goal 1, is the interdisciplinarity, because interdisciplinarity is really a way of being deeply innovation, by looking at science and looking at migration from different fields into the field of tech. And this is now recognized by the success of science robotics. You know, I've been an editorial board founding member, and this was not really, it was an adventure, but now it has an impact factor of 27.5, and is the role of science in robotics, and very successful, and demonstrating how discoveries can bring to new solutions in robotics. So going back to the analysis that I introduced, so what are the technologies that would be included in the robot companion of Chicago 2035? Well, many, including, for example, degrees of freedom. And you see here, don't go into detail, but just to give you how we conceived this roadmap, if you will. So in blue and black is incremental innovation, okay? The one that can be predicted. And in red, there is maybe just an important call of disruptive innovation. That comes from science, comes from other disciplines, comes from wherever you want, and that may accelerate the development of a new system, like in our case, the robot companion. So this, for example, so dexterity, degrees of freedom. In other areas, force exerted, this is a big challenge. And we are working, all of us, a lot of new actuators that could change the density, you know, the amount of force that a robot can exert in for the same volume. Because this is a challenge. You know, many people are talking about only intelligent, but robots have a body. There is no robot without a body. And the body means movement and means force. So degrees of freedom, very important, and force is very important if you want to make real robots and, of course, a real avatar, because that's the other point. So materials an incredible amount. I'm sure that a lot of new solutions will come, and Cecilia and also Gordon will describe some aspect of this. But for example, in our institute, we are also working on non-conventional components built by different materials. So material science is very important to develop the body of future robots, but also artificial organs, prostheses, and so on. So for example, this is my colleague now, a very young colleague, like many of the PI, by the way, Leonardo Ricotti. And you see, by the way, this is a paper on science robotics, okay? On what we call biohybrid organic machines. But there are other things. For example, here, collaboration or the work at the University of Tokyo or Waseda University about ultra-thin polymeric films that could be used to build muscle-based actuators. A revolution could come from this kind of research, basic research. But well, and then, of course, intelligence is another main aspect we already seen, and collaboration, the revolution. If you see here, Professor Sami Al-Dadin, at that time he was a PhD student, and he did those experiments even against his supervisors, but it's impressive. And his research was at the basis of the revolution of collaborative robotics, demonstrating to people that robots may not be dangerous, that in fact you can touch robots, and not only touch, being touched, or even hit like from that. So the revolution of collaboration and the revolution of interaction. We discussed about that because it's not the same thing, collaboration and interaction. So just to see this kind of basic idea. So how far are we, or we could be, from developing a companion robot in 2035 and in 2050, maybe. But meanwhile, we can develop real-world companion robots. And, sorry, I don't know what happened. And so the definition of robot companions that we have started to address in 20 years ago, and that has become already a field, a complex and multidisciplinary, and leading to a number of real applications. So those are some of the ones that we have developed and, as you see, deployed in real cases, real small towns with real citizens or real patients, learning a lot about how this can be accepted by people. For example, in this field, also what is called social robotics. Here is another paper on science robotics. Is about dialogue and experimentation that is close to the context of use. For example, the role of companion robot or learning companion robot with children that actually leads to deepening social connection, like companionship or affiliation with the robot. So there is already evidence that this kind of interaction from a scientific point of view can work. And there is also evidence that a number of ethical concerns are raised by users. Users accept this kind of robot, but they are smart and they observe that some problem could be encountered in this kind of activity. For example, deception, the reduced human contact, the privacy, sustainability. You know, many people believe, well, these robots are too expensive and they would discriminate people. So the ones who can afford to get robot companions or to get avatars and the ones who may not. So this discrimination, if you will, is something that some people have already observed. And those are ethical concerns. And we, in 2001, actually here in Tokyo, not in Kyoto, in Tokyo, we had a workshop, Italy, Japan, and we we started the field of roboethics in order to discuss the potential and the limit of robotics to help building a better human society. So we are talking about 20 years ago, actually, there was a very nice set of papers on the RAM magazine and so on. And we were able to translate some of those concepts into rules that the European Commission accepted. So, as was already mentioned yesterday, Europe is at the forefront of regulating robotics and then AI. So there is, we presented, our colleagues from the law department were presenting these, the organization of these rules that were partly included in some guidelines by the Commission. From now on, what is happening? I decided to start working with other kind of colleagues together with the previous one, that is philosophers, okay? Because after this productive phase of research and also of robotic companion in the real world, I think that going back to basic, really to try to understand what are the human implications of our research would be very important. And so the consideration that I will present from now on are generated together with my colleagues in the field of philosophy. So, for example, according to them, I'm sharing some of the definitions. This belongs also to a different community, even the meaning of some words are different. So we are learning, they are learning. Very, very interesting interdisciplinary activity. But for example, the role of interaction, that is interaction that determines action on someone else. Actually, in this case, someone else does not necessarily profit from it. Collaboration means working with someone on something and to reach a common goal. So you see there is a subtle but very important difference of what is interacting and collaborating. Of course, collaborating is much more sophisticated and useful, if you will. So the human-robot collaboration paradigm essentially implies to complete the human-robot interaction paradigm so that this collaboration could be secure, self-reliant, adaptive, supporting a two-way dialogue, identifying stakeholder needs. And there are papers in the philosophical community that do that. And then also, there is a need, in fact, at this point for a paradigm shift based on this understanding of the deep relation between a human and a machine. So, for example, the awareness and sensitivity to the social environment, the dynamic interaction capabilities, and also a rich understanding of companionship that takes the situatedness. Situatedness is like a theoretical position according to which the mind is ontologically and functionally intertwined with environmental, social, and cultural factors. So it essentially is a deeper understanding of where the robot, where the person is, but also this is very important in the definition of what are called social norms, practices, and institutions and at stake. And you see, this leads to the integration of human social science analysis into science and engineering initiative, because robots, like Avatar, could be social actors. And so within social robotics, in fact, the robot companion is a subgroup and is designed to establish a relation and an emotional bonding with the user. So robot companion, in fact, can modify the social value. You know, this is the role that, according to philosophy, is very important. Working, collaborating with a robot or with an avatar has a deep influence also on the humans. And of course, we want to design this not just for shaking hands, but maybe to generate a coherent and meaningful experience. There is something deeper than that. So it's a multifaceted social experience. In fact, according to empirical findings, robot companionship are perceived by users as capable of being attentive to me, looking after me, experiencing together with me. So this kind of expectations by the user. Of course, we know that this may be unrealistic. You know, sometimes people had an over-expectation respect to what the real robot can do. And so it's very important to make a long-term ecological condition, that is, to establish a long-term relation, not just a visit to a lab or to a hospital, but something that is intended to last and create deep relations. Because the robot companion can be social actors. And they can be designed, and their performance can be designed according to real people needs and expectations, like in the case of our dust cart service that was deployed for 2 months to collect waste and to disposal according to what the municipality want. And you see, with the participation of the municipality itself. Social norms are very important. You know, sometimes we in engineering don't know really what this means, but actually they are a critical component of the grammar of a society. Essentially, is a theory of what motivates collective patterns of behavior. Because why should people behave in certain ways? So why social norms are different in Japan than, for example, in Europe? No, because there are different rules. So, for example, people conform to norms because they have empirical expectation, or they believe that they ought to conform to it as an appropriate behavior, so the normative expectation. So there are empirical expectations or normative expectations that regulate these social norms according to social norm theory, essentially is behavior, if you will. And there are emergent social norms. So the robot can be norms drivers. You can look at the test here and see that the behavior of robots can influence the social norms. So, like if you will, policemen, you know, or teachers or adults, you know, who have an influence on kids, young, about defining behaviors, where we have a responsibility. Robots could be, and this, in fact, there is already some evidence, according to the social community, of the influence of robot companions or avatar. Then when a good relation is established, can be used to influence social norms. So you see the importance in a beneficial term, also in a negative term, if you will. there could be a gang of criminal avatars who could influence social norms in a different way. That is exactly what happened with kids. If kids are born, maybe not in Japan, even in Japan sometimes, in a special area where there are people devoted to crime, they are influenced. The social norms become the ones developed by that group of models, of people. So, but there are rules and signs about that. So the importance of this vision, and also on the role of the augmentation of the active life of citizens, and as I said, I go back to this model that personally I like very much, because I believe that this is going to have a big impact. The word avatar, beginning from now, September, for next year, will become very, very popular among citizens, among people and child. So I think also for the Moonshot, for Goal One, it's important to have some answers about this. So what are the science fiction avatars? What would be the realistic avatar in a scenario that is not far? Again, there will be family values, there will be environmental issues already in the first movie, you may remember. So that could, as I said, influence the creation, why not, of social norms together with the solution in different cases. The concept of immersion with Robot Companion, in fact, can be extended to avatars. So immersion also in social science is a very important concept. I will talk about a reality immersion or character immersion or narrative immersion, again, using many kinds of tools, including computer graphics, simulation, and also reality. And this is the approach that Goal One is pursuing, that is very sound, in fact, also from the social science point of view. Because, for example, the one embodiment and many agents is pushing the idea of the societal inclusion, while the concept of one agent with many embodiments is pushing the idea of capabilities. And this idea of the capability is very important also in philosophy and social science. Sometimes we use the term capability, ability, like that, but actually there is an entire school of philosophers who have worked on this idea of capability. Because, in fact, the development of technology like the CA, like the cybernetic avatar, will allow to augment people's capability significantly, to restore or to augment. So, but what are the capabilities? And the economists, the philosophers like Amartya Sen or Martha Nussbaum have pioneered this capability approach, because there is a difference between functionings and capability. Actually, functioning and capabilities are not the same thing. So functioning essentially are doings and beings, okay? Essentially are the activities that a person has achieved, so like being well-nourished, getting married, being educated, and traveling. While capabilities are the real or substantive opportunity that they need to possess in order to achieve these doings and beings. So functioning is doing things, capabilities being able to do these things here. And so there are books about the capability approach and about the freedom to achieve well-being in a matter is a matter of what people are able to do and want to be. So while, for example, traveling is a function, the real opportunity to travel is the corresponding capability. And so we have to address this very carefully in our research on Robot Companion and Avatar in order not to mislead this difference. And you see here, for example, there is a list of the central human capabilities according to the book Creating Capability. And you see the central human capabilities. The list is life, bodily health, bodily integrity, senses, imagination, thought, emotions, and so on, till the control over one's environment. And then there are the so-called conversion factors. That is the ability to convert the capabilities into function. And this is where, these are social, there are the public policies, there are the social norms, the practices that may discriminate. So the idea that comes from the social science community is using technology to promote this conversion. That is, the translation of capability into function by, for example, removing obstacles, physical obstacles, psychological obstacles, and more. And here you see that there are solid work that have been developed about that. The role of technology as a very important conversion factor that we should be able to implement and measure. So, for example, in RoboLaw, we have applied the capability approach into robotic design. So the rules that have been included take into account this type of considerations about the role of technology. And the introduction of avatars, in fact, may require the reconceptualization and assessment of some capabilities. Some issues related to bodily health, integrity, emotion, affiliation, control could be redesigned within this project and effort, because the impact of the capability approach on individual well-being, on social arrangement, in social change in society can be very strong. And here we go back to the issue of ethics by revisiting, we can do that in this framework of how technology can help to fulfill the expectation of people in terms of values about what is a good action, what is the value of human life, what is justice, what is good life or good work, and we can talk about that. So the ethics of technology can be applied ethics, or ethics of technology can be an example of applied ethics focusing on the normative issues raised by the design, the development, implementation, the use of technologies. And I'm going to the conclusion by remembering how many people and philosophers have worked on this idea of the conceptualization of technology, again, as an enabling factor between the capabilities and functioning. And this is a list of those people who have debated and still debated. There is a very active debate on this. And the role, of course, is about the responsibility of us as researchers. So the role or the impact of neutrality in this kind of development. And actually, there is an empirical turn of science and technology studies to drive the empirical investigation, scientific and technological practices. And you see here the importance of the action of engineers and the process of technological development that is deeply analyzed. We have been active in this field. Just in this year, we have organized 3 events at ICRA, at Roman, and at the Robo Philosophy Conference by involving a mix of people, so roboticists like me and some colleagues and philosophers in this kind of debate oriented to companionship, to the issue of work, and to the assessing technology and social impact, also this kind of solution. So very practical case. Conclusion, I have 30 seconds. Is a list. Actually, my opinion is that the Moonshot program, in particular Goal 1, may have an extraordinary impact on science, technology, society in Japan, but also worldwide, I believe. There are many, many challenging questions, and some of them have been addressed. Some others are not yet known. You know, this is an emerging area also for me and for our colleagues. You know, creating this common language, trying to understand each other is extremely important. Here is a list of questions. I don't have time to analyze all of them, but essentially some of them, for example, is, I just mentioned one as a roboticist, you know, a grand challenge to develop super cybernetic avatar, you know, because I think this is a key issue. You know, if the avatar must be a real avatar, like in the movie, you know, like in iRobot or in the Avatar movie, we would be expected to develop super exciting solutions. So not only to restore people who are severely disabled with simple solutions, that is fine, but also to provide able people, let's say, with extraordinary experience thanks to technology. And then other issues, for example, the issue of the metaverse, the role of international collaboration. And I think this is essentially what I wish to share with you. Thank you very much for your attention.